This week on Command Control Power, we are featuring a patron-only show for our supporters. If you're already subscribed on Patreon, you will find this week's show in your private podcast feed. To sign up and get instant access to special features like this one and several other recent patron-only episodes, go to commandcontrolpower.com and click on Support. For our general audience, we're featuring a classic episode from our catalog of nearly 500 episodes. We hope you enjoy it. This show was originally broadcast on August 12, 2014.
Welcome to Command Control Power. Tonight, we are discussing Entrepreneurial Spirit, a topic brought up by Jerry. Jerry, what did you have in mind about this?
Well, I just think that when anybody decides to go into business for themselves, and we're going to pretty much target the show to people who are running their own business, not working for a larger concern, it's quite a leap of faith to decide that that's what you're going to do. And sometimes the jumping off point is smooth for people, and sometimes it's just a huge step to take, to let go of maybe some secure job where you're an IT professional, where you've got benefits, and making that leap to decide to go into business for yourself. So I was very interested. I was very happy to share my own story, and also to hear about you and Joe and Sam and Joe about what your stories were and how you got there. Because I think that's really important for people. And if you're an ACN that's listening, or someone who's thinking about being an ACN and need a little bit of inspiration to maybe take that big leap of faith and try to go for it, hopefully this show will point you in the right direction maybe and inspire you.
That's a great introduction, Jerry. I didn't really wasn't thinking of it that way, but it is a great topic. I mean, we all have kind of individual stories of how we got here. And yeah, I don't think we've shared them on the show before. So spill your guts.
Okay. I think I'll go first then, since this is my idea. So I was working for a manufacturing company in Connecticut, and we had, I think I mentioned a little bit about this on a previous show, where we had Macs and PCs, and they were all networked together, and we had been using Macs since OS 6 days, and we were using Windows 95 and Windows XP when it first came out. And, our challenge was to get all these machines talking to one another and getting them to communicate with CNC machines, computer numerically controlled machining centers, turning centers. If you've ever seen any kind of a behind the closed doors of Apple and sort of their research lab, a lot of the equipment that they had was very, very similar to the equipment we had. As a matter of fact, most of that machinery that you see in Johnny Ive's workshop is all familiar stuff for what we were running. So, again, I learned my craft through the school of hard knocks. I never had really time, and the people who ran the business were not necessarily predisposed to having me to go out to get some certifications. It was just basically, here's a bunch of equipment, make it all work. And so that was my training. So, and that went for a good number of years. And we had a real good, successful run. And shortly after 9/11, and although 9/11 didn't really have it just seemed to be the turning point for a lot of manufacturing in the U.S. More and more of it went offshore, and we were competing very heavily with China. And finally, all our opportunities and all our work opportunities local to the United States and Connecticut seemed to dry up, and work got less and less. And finally, the company pulled up their tent and moved on. So at that point, I was I was over 40, and I had to decide, what do I do? Where do I go? What was my, calling at this point? And I just remembered how I just detested working on PCs and how I really enjoyed working on Macs. And I don't know what led me to thinking about being an Apple consultant, other than me just trying to think very fast on my feet and come up with an idea of something to do. And as timing would be in life, it's not always perfect. I had just gotten married, and very shortly after we got married, my wife got pregnant, and we had this infant child, and I was jobless. So, but so here's an interesting thing that actually happened, and it was sort of, the timing again was pretty perfect. Apple was still making Power PCs, but they were on the cusp of introducing the Intel line. And I think for a lot of us, when the Intel line basically hit the streets, it was a real turning point in terms of business opportunities and really opening up Apple from just being sort of a very niche market company to this global giant that it is right now. And the work was phasing down, but I wasn't completely out of a job. So I was kind of like looking around for employment. And again, the idea of, maybe doing something with Apple computers, maybe going out and doing consulting sort of crossed my mind. And I don't know how I came across the Apple Consultants Locator, but ran my zip code. And lo and behold, literally on a parallel street to the company that I was working at was this Apple consultant who was a single man operation working out of his house, very much like I do now. And I just gave him a call and talked to him about what I wanted to do. And he was very nice, and he was very supportive, and gave me a few of his own personal thoughts. And one of the things he had shared was that I was thinking like, well, I'd like to do this, but should I'd come from a college education. So, I was used to getting, degrees and certain amounts of credentials, viable credentials, that I figured if somebody was going to engage me to do work, that would be something that I would present. And I felt
you don't need all that, Jerry. That's overrated.
Well, that's exactly what this consultant told me. He said, you don't need that stuff. You just go out there and you start doing it. And I'm like, oh, I don't know, So I think we ended up having two conversations. And during the second conversation, I said, I really really want to kind of see if this is something for me. And I think his point was, it wasn't like you would never need certifications, but I think he was saying, just to get started, just to see if you like it, put out some feelers and see if you could get some gigs, and maybe there'd be some opportunity for you.
So he was actually encouraging you to start up a business near him?
He was encouraging me to try the market as an Apple consultant or doing Apple work, and not necessarily going through all the motions of trying to get certification first. I thought at the time, it didn't. It's ultimately what I didn't do because I didn't feel comfortable with that. But I think in hindsight, that's probably wasn't bad advice. I mean, you guys may disagree, but during the second conversation, he said to me, "Why don't you come out with me on a job and see what it's like?" Which I thought was extremely generous. So, Sam, just to answer your question, I don't think he was really concerned about competition. I think he felt like, there's enough work to go around. I mean, admittedly, all three of us were in a small state. We all have work enough to support ourselves and our families, and there's other companies doing what we do. So there's definitely work out there. So I think he wasn't very he was very open and generous, and he wasn't protective of any kind of fiefdom, and he wasn't being sort of measured in what he said. He was being very forthright, and I really admired him for that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. So I went out with him. And it was fun. And we went to just a small graphic studio, and they were getting a new iMac installed. And this is probably early days of iMac, but it was a all-in-one unit. And I watched him work, and for me, it seemed a little slow-paced, and I felt like there was a lot of drama in the installation. And I'm one of these people, and I probably was because of the background that I had, where just bang it out, just get it done and get the client up and running in front of the machine and let them explore it. But there seemed to be, sort of a played out drama with getting this machine up and running. What do you mean?
Like a play-by-play, or like difficulty?
I didn't think, yeah. He referred to getting this new machine up and running as like building your new machine. Well, we're going to build your new Mac.
Right.
And, I was there. I was just, wet behind the ears, but I'm kind of like rolling my eyes, to myself, of course, it just seemed a little too dramatic. It didn't, the style didn't really work for me. But, so I didn't actually go out and start looking for jobs until I did get certification. And I believe I got desktop certification. I didn't go to a training class. I did it self-guided. So I got a book, hit the book really hard. And if you have a pretty good sense of Macs, and I felt like I did. I mean, I knew nothing about server at the time, but I had a good sense of the desktop that I was able to, power through the book and pass the test. So that's sort of what I did to get going. But the great thing was, again, timing was good because they were it was the tail end of the PowerPC era. There seemed to be some opportunities emerging, and this job was phasing out. So I was still able to carry a little bit of benefits along, but it could call up the job, my job that was going away, and say, I'm not going to be in tomorrow, or I won't be in for half a day. And I was able to pick up a little bit of work. So I sort of eased into it that way. And it was very fortunate for me. So I kind of ramped up my consulting business through that. So I was able to, still draw a small salary, get some benefits, and sort of ease into the Apple consulting.
That's great. You didn't have to, just jump with both feet. You were able to kind of take that smooth ride, moonlight a little bit,
Yeah, no, exactly. And it was, of course, any respect. And I knew that I wanted to, for the bulk of my business, to target small to medium-sized business. So I knew that I couldn't pitch to a client and then say, well, I'll see you at 5:30, after the day ended. You knew you had to be there at like 9 a.m. or 8:30 or whenever they needed you and be ready to deliver and to do your job. So I was very thankful for that. And the only other tool I had in my tool belt going into being self-employed was for this business, not only doing the IT work, but I also was doing all their payroll. I was doing weekly federal taxes that I was paying, and I was doing all the quarterly returns. So I felt, even though I don't really have that in my current consulting business, I mean, we still have to do some quarterlies, but nowhere near to the extent that I had to file 941s on a quarterly basis. So, but I felt like I had really good basic accounting chops with a small business. So I felt like if that challenge presented itself to me, I could sort of motor through that without having to hire somebody else to take me through that step.
Yeah, that was the biggest challenge for me getting started was just really not knowing anything about bookkeeping or accounting and having to learn all that, not to mention learning the software side as well of accounting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's pretty much my story. And hats off to this consultant in Connecticut who was very nice and very generous. And, he gave me what I still consider to be pretty sound advice. Because a lot of people are very, it's kind of like the music business. They say that really good musicians perform and okay musicians teach. And that's not always true. But, a lot of people can be really book smart in terms of being a consultant. But then there's that whole other side of the business that we speak of on a week-to-week basis where it's just simply dealing with the clients. And, you have to have some sort of a personality to be able to not only get a new client, but to keep a client.
Yeah, that's true. It is one of the most important things is, as we've talked about in the show previously, is personality, because of how in front of people we tend to be. There's just so many, every situation involves a person. And I think, Sam, you wrote this in a brief bio recently for another podcast that we all appeared on, how important it is to have the personality in addition to the technical chops. And we've talked about it on past shows as well, where you can teach tech to almost anybody who's technically inclined in some way, who's interested. But it's really hard to teach a personality.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, not only just the bedside manner, as we call it, but even the situations that are really stressful when something goes horribly wrong, and not to just completely freak out. To be able to show calm in front of the client, because if you freak out, they're going to freak out. So to be able to handle that situation much better is a big deal.
Yeah, absolutely. And it goes a long way just to like, not only calming the client down, but I mean, there's technical benefits to that as well, where you end up getting better information from a person who's calmer, which leads to a better resolution. So, it is really important.
I'm sure we all have taught ourselves over the years how to be calmer in those situations. I used to find that I talked much faster and at a slightly higher pitch when I started to get nervous around a client. So I used to have to try and teach myself to be calm and then turn around and face the client and talk to them when I knew something could be horribly wrong. And it made it better because they didn't see the panic in my voice or hear the panic in my voice at the time.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And sometimes we're all in those situations where we either know something is probably horribly wrong with their server, for instance, or we don't really know the answer. And we're going to have to do a little bit of, Google food to find it out, and to have the confidence to sort of put yourself in that position and to tell the client that, what we're experiencing here is not a normal situation, and, we'll solve this for you, but we need to do a little exploratory work here. And to be able to put that across and still give them a sense of confidence that you're not just some joker who they hired at a premium hourly rate who's just on Google banging away, trying to look for answers.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And clients can oftentimes see that. I hear a lot of feedback about former consultants. In our line of work, we oftentimes are introduced to a client who was previously working with someone else, and for whatever reason it didn't work out, and they find someone else, they find us, and they'll even remark on previous consultants saying, well, I mean, he was really great. I mean, technically he was awesome. He was really, really smart. And then there's like always the feedback about the personality. It comes up. It's like, I couldn't get him to leave or something like that, or just like, but I never quite felt like a good rapport with him, or, that kind of thing. And in those situations where you end up encountering one of those issues that you're not familiar with, a consultant with confidence and a personality, can remain calm and just basically communicate that with the client, that we're still working on it and it's still in process and that kind of thing. Whereas another consultant without this sort of, that same, personality for it, might start some of that sort of hand wavy stuff and you start using more jargon and, talking faster and the client can really pick up on that. I mean, it doesn't fool anybody when you just start spewing jargon. It doesn't make the client feel more comfortable. It makes them start to really question you even more, the more just random words you're spouting.
Right.
Yeah, random to them for sure.
Right.
And they could be random. I mean, if you're just trying to throw out jargon just to throw them off, or the flux capacitor is off kilter.
Right. Or we've seen this where the consultant will just bury their head in the computer and not communicate anything to the client.
Yeah.
Just trying to dig himself out of a hole and, doesn't say a word.
I always find it so interesting, and I see that as well displayed in the chat, that how many of us don't come from a technical background, at least education-wise. So many different people come from different walks of life. Jerry, you came from a different walk of life as well. And, people that majored in different areas. I mean, Michael Reinhardt majored in accounting. So you talk about needing an accountant, guys. We got one right here. But I find it interesting in our field, especially, a lot of people do not come from this. They didn't study computer sciences or something like that in college. As a matter of fact, Luis Geraldo just actually said he's a musician. And that I find a lot of people from that field, a ton of people in IT come from a musical background.
Right. So my degree was in music ed and performance.
There you go.
Yeah.
SciMac is currently hiring musicians, so submit your resumes now.
That's probably one way to start if you're looking for a tech.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, for my part, I went to college for a year. I dropped out like Steve Jobs, so that gives me some credibility there.
Nice.
As I always joke at parties, I never learned to play beer pong, so you got to bear with me.
I can teach you.
Awesome. We'll have to do a session here at SciMac Worldwide Headquarters.
Sweet.
So who's up to bat, Joe or Sam?
I'll actually jump in if you don't mind. I was just thinking something funny about, because I've always said to people that I'm sort of a serial entrepreneur. Like I've tried so many different things ever since I was a kid. And one thing that I still get made fun of by one of my buddies was when I was 16, I actually started this, it was called a reminder service. And what you would do is I had a phone number you could call. You just put ads in the paper. And you could call this number and leave a message to remind yourself of something. And I would call you at that time to remind you to take on that task or to perform that task.
That is so awesome.
So I used to put out ads in all the local papers, and I had a home phone number that I used to call people from. And I made like nothing, but it was just the start of my entrepreneurial spirit, as we're talking about here. This is where I wanted to just start new things, and that's where I started it.
And how old were you roughly?
I was about 16.
Cool.
Yeah,
that's
and
great.
I forget how I forget how I got into it, like how I started up this little gig, but it was ridiculous at the time. And like to this day, one of my friends that never lets things die, he still makes fun of me for it every chance he sees me. But going along those lines, I mean, that's all my life up until now. I've always tried to start something different. And, in my case, at least the HCS side is sort of, when you look at it as a whole, is part of a few different offices. But I had to build this office with my business partner. And that took some amount of years to kind of jump in. And, I like you, Jerry, I mean, I had a wife and soon after a child, and we had to provide. And I was doing a little bit of moonlighting as well. I did get a job in the tech field working in a company, and when I was on lunch break, I would go help out. I had an hour basically to help out, and then at 5:30 I had a chance to help as well. But that job I was completely underqualified for, and I got the job as a Mac technician because the IT director asked me if I knew what a firewall was, and my answer was yes, and he said, "You're hired." And that was the extent of my interview. So moving on from that, I jumped into HCS, and Jay and I partnered our way through that. And I've been slowly building that over the last about 14 years. But continuing on with my spirit there, we started an AATC, an Apple Authorized Training Center, about, I think, 5 years ago now, when I realized there were exactly 0 Apple Authorized Training Centers in the whole state of Connecticut. So I figured that was a good opportunity to pick something up. So we jumped in with both feet on that one, started up. I originally had a brick and mortar in Danbury, Connecticut, and then opened up our satellite office in Tampa. So it's been a lot of years in this field, and I love it. I met guys like you and all the other guys that are listening out there and the conventions that we go to. But, if you have the spirit for it, if you have the knack to want to try something new, you should definitely go for it. I mean, that's all my life. They say there's a common saying that entrepreneurs fail more than they succeed. And I think it's certainly true because I failed a million times, but I've succeeded at a few. And those are the ones that I've been able to take and run with.
As much as you're comfortable talking about, Sam, could you just talk about that disconnect from the company where you were working for somebody and then you met Jay and decided that you both would go into business together?
Yeah, actually, I met Jay originally. I was an advertising major in college, so okay. I was working in this company that did it's actually hysterical. They did in-store demos and marketing. So my area was the Southeast region, and I had like a Piggly Wiggly's, those chains and Publix and all those. And basically, if you saw someone handing out Oreos at the end of an aisle or something like that, I placed them in that store, and that was my job for a while. But Jay was the IT consultant there, and when he wasn't there at the marketing place I was working at.
Gotcha. Okay.
Not at Piggly Wiggly. But so when Jay would leave the office because he was a consultant, people started turning to me for questions because I was the youngest guy there. I was 22 at the time, and they said, "Oh, you must know computers. So how do you fix this?" And we were all Macs, and so I just kind of started to dive into there. And figured stuff out. Sometimes I'd mess up and Jay would come in and be like, "Who did this?" But most of the time I was able to kind of figure it out there. And before Jay and I joined forces, I left that job and got a job, as I mentioned, as the in-house Mac guy for this company. And Jay and I kept in touch. And through all that contact, he was starting to get a little busy, and he said, "Look, I could really use someone to jump in with." And I was like, great, I'll leave all my benefits and everything that I have, kind of like what you were talking about, Jerry, but I was able to slowly transition into it. And that's when I left and jumped in into business with Jay. But at the beginning, I was working like maybe 5 hours a week, and I was freaking out for a while because that was my sole income after I left the other company. And the little bump that you have to get through at the very beginning is the toughest part right there. Should I stay with it? Should I continue on? And if you have the fortitude to get through that and, financial stability as well, then hopefully you come out clean on the other side.
And as much as you remember, how did you flesh that out with Jay? I mean, not specifics, but like, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to start the company and we're going to call it this. And what were some of the mechanics of that? Just for somebody who's listening who might
partner up with somebody, or some people start off on their own, some people partner up. At the beginning, I was very much a junior tech. So we had to build that kind of partnership part of the relationship.
Okay.
So I would kind of ride along with him, and that was my training. Someone in the chat even mentioned like any book it's great to get certified and read the books and everything, but as we all know, getting out there and learning and touching is the only way to really get your feet wet. So I was going out with him a lot and kind of learning that stuff.
And how is he getting the gigs?
He only had a few clients at the time. It was a leap of faith for him too, because he kind of felt, well, I think I'm starting to build something here, but I don't want to get in over my head. And he was, I think back then, we had the ACN back then. So he was part of the ACN back then. Do you guys remember how long it's been around?
Before ACN, it was something else.
Yeah, it was something else, and I can't remember. Anyway, we did get some business through that, but also just word of mouth is the biggest way we've ever gotten business. I mean, Joe and I have joked about this in the past. There are a couple towns near us, and he has all of, what is it, New Canaan, Joe?
Yeah, exactly.
And I have all of Darien, and it's all because like the soccer moms reached out to each other, and then some of them even talked to their husbands, and we got the business out of their husband's company or something like that. So it's all word of mouth in my area at least, and I think Joe would say the same down here.
Definitely, yep. Yeah, and we've talked about the quality of sort of word of mouth referrals in the past as well, where, you end up with basically pre-qualified leads, people that talk to each other, and just in conversation, sort of organically, they maybe hear about a friend who is struggling with iCloud or something like that, and then they say, call this guy. This is what he does for me, and so they come to you like just fully like ready to they've cash in hand, like ready to hire you, and it's usually a good fit because they're friends of friends, basically, or friends of clients, and those leads are great. There's a very high quality to them typically, because again, they're self-selected, and they also tend to, they tend to trust you implicitly. Like they come, you come highly recommended. They come to you looking for help and knowing you can provide it. So it's just great to get clients to tell their friends and to send business your way. And that's really been my sort of overriding principle all along, is like, whatever works for the client. If they want to go with another consultant, it works. That's fine for me, as long as it works for them. And if you do right by the client, you can't go wrong, pretty much.
It's true. I mean, they will love you forever if you do right by them, and you're not trying to screw them over. You're just trying to do what's best for them.
So I'm curious. I asked this question in the chat, and a couple of people have sort of chimed in with some answers here. And I'm curious about you guys. Sam, obviously your sort of entrepreneurial spirit goes back a ways, and Jerry, you described how you sort of made that transition, later on. Do you guys have like anybody in your family, a history of sort of entrepreneurs or people in business in general, just in your family history?
Well, the dirty little secret to my story was that the company I was working for was a company that my dad actually started with another gentleman, and
no kidding.
he never ran his own business until he was 49 years old and decided to go into business for himself. And again, it was a good run for while it lasted. While some manufacturing, tool and die manufacturing specifically, was still thriving in the United States. So he made a little good retirement nest egg. But other than that, no. Other than that, and that was probably, certainly a little bit of inspiration, but also I had a sense of, even though I was working for this company, I felt, all those years that I was kind of working for myself at the same time. And one of the things that they always say is, if you work for yourself, if you ever work for yourself and, you're able to make a go of it, you'll never work for anybody else again.
Yeah, that's really
if
true.
you can help it, for sure. My family, I'm trying to think. I was actually one of the first to go to college in my family, and everyone else, had jobs or whatever. But on my mom's side in particular, that a lot of them were in the wholesale diamond business, actually. And a few of my uncles started their own. Well, if you're familiar with New York City, or even if you're not, there's an area of 47th Street called Diamond Way in New York City.
Sure. And
that's where each of them popped up in their own shops and basically started their own wholesale diamond part of the business. And that was actually kind of a big risk because of the amount of investment you needed. But that, I think, probably had an influence on me, although I had no desire to go into wholesale diamond business. It probably had an influence in me, just in that they started their own practices in whatever way they could. And that kind of always piqued my interest. And I was just never good working for anybody anyway. I was a terrible employee. I mean, I wasn't a terrible employee. I did my job. But here's just a quick example. Is I used to live just a few minutes from my job, and I had to be there at 9 a.m. And I was late pretty much every day. And my boss was finally like, "Look, Sam, you're coming in late all the time." He's like, "Do you want to start later hours, like 9:30 to 6 instead?" And I said, "No, you know what? I'm going to make it a point to get up earlier. I'm going to be here by 8:30 every day." He's like, "What?" He's like, "You can't even get here at 9." I said, "Don't worry. I'm going to be here at 8:30. So he said, "Fine, you can go 8:30 to 5. What I was planning on was, I knew he didn't get there till about 9. So I could come in about 8:40, 8:45, and he never knew the difference. So it worked for me until I left that company.
Gaming the system.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well,
how about you, Joe?
How about you, sir?
Well,
in the background in terms of entrepreneurs.
Yeah. So, I realized a long time ago that it seems like it's in my blood, and I'm getting the sense maybe it's not so much that it's like in a person's blood, as just if once someone close to you has a business or starts a business, and you kind of witness the process and you see the benefits and you see how it all plays out and you see that it's a possibility, I think maybe people are more inclined to, give it a try. But in my case, it does go pretty deep. So for example, my grandmother was one of the first, female driving school instructors in the state of Connecticut. And she had a business. I think she may have been actually the first. And she had a business with her husband, my grandfather, basically doing, driving school instruction, teaching people to drive. So that goes, kind of way back. And then both my parents have businesses. My mom runs a daycare and my dad is a travel agent. So growing up, I was always kind of, I guess I just had that all around me pretty much. And I never, kind of like you, Sam, I never really thought about it like, oh, I could do this, or I want to be in one of these businesses or whatever. But I think just having it there in the background, makes it something that's more accessible than it would be to someone who has never, had someone close to them running a business and seeing what that's all about. It may be more of a leap for someone who hasn't had that experience.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a natural progression for me. Let's see, where do I begin? So I guess I kind of fell into it. I mean, I started working for a company. I think I've told some of this story before. I just sort of randomly asked an old high school mentor of mine, like, what do I do? I'm not really interested in this job that I have in this corporate job. And what do I do? And he's sort of pointing me in the direction of a local Apple authorized service provider. And I ended up starting basically like the following week with them. They needed somebody they were ready to hire somebody on the spot pretty much. So got some training there, and then realized pretty soon thereafter, after about a year and a half or so, that it was something I was interested in. I liked doing it. I seemed to be good at it. And, I thought, well, let's, I actually didn't think, let me go out on my own. I thought, let me ask for a raise. And I went in there one Saturday, I think it was, and I asked for a raise. I said, these people are hiring us because they want me to come back. And, it seems that I'm somewhat valuable to the company. can I have more money? and, and basically,
Please.
please. They weren't prepared to offer me anything significant. And I said, I think I'm going to have to put in my notice. And they said, well, this is it then. If you're putting in your notice now, that's the end. There's no like 2-week notice because we don't want you to go and like collect our clients' information and, bring them with you kind of thing. So I basically fell into it. I just was, I found myself essentially quitting on the spot. I didn't intend to do it, but it just sort of happened and that was it. And I thought, wow, what am I going to do now? And
that took some cojones, though, man.
I know.
Well, you seem to be such a non-confrontational person. You must have had a lot of. This must have been festering for quite a while.
Well, I knew that for me to continue doing this, I needed to be earning more money. I just knew at the time like it wasn't going to work out long term unless I was able to really be a little bit more invested in it and be making a little bit more money. Specifically, I wanted a commission. I thought like if I'm out there representing the company so well and, earning all of this repeat business and, clients seem to really like me, I'm doing a good job and so on. I should be entitled to some kind of commission to kind of make it worth my while. Otherwise, it's not going to last that long for me just going out earning my, standard hourly rate, whether I'm sitting here, watching the clock in the office or going out and getting business and doing the work on site.
And were you aware of what they were billing out for time? Did that help to sort of like push you in this direction, or did you have no idea? It could have been $500 an hour.
I knew. Yeah, no.
You did know.
I clearly knew. Yeah, and I was basically earning, something like less than 10% of it,
Sure.
on an hourly basis, and and that was over 10 years ago. But it just sort of occurred to me, it's like this, like I could be sitting here just waiting for 5 p.m., or I could be going on site and, doing a great job and earning income for the company. What's my motivation to like really go out there and really work efficiently and go from one client to the next, versus just kind of like biding my time. I needed a little bit more financial incentive to stick around, basically. And I essentially just told them that. And like I said, I just sort of found myself, faced with this, like, okay, I just quit my job. I didn't realize I was about to do that, but here we are. And the way I got into working for myself was I had been scheduled to work with a client that coming week, the following Wednesday, I think it was. And like later that day on that same Saturday, I thought, this client is expecting to see me. I was brought in to help her in particular because the prior consultant from the same company, she wasn't happy with his work and they wanted me to kind of save the relationship a little bit. And she was very happy with me. No, from another guy from the same company. And she was kind of a gentle person and I thought I don't want to just like not show up. Like I kind of owe her the courtesy of a phone call. Like it's not you, it's me kind of thing. Like I just quit my job and like that's why you won't be seeing me. Kind of wanted her to get the story from me directly. So I just called her up and I just let her know. I said, I won't be there on Wednesday. Just want to let you know, and it turned out, she basically said, I said something like they're gonna send somebody else and this kind of thing, and just wanted to let you know and that kind of thing. And she said, well, what are you gonna do? And I said, I'm not really sure yet. And she's like, well, I don't want somebody else. I want you. Are you gonna? I was like, yeah. I'm considering like starting my own company and kind of just consulting. And she said, well, then can you come on Wednesday? And I was like. Yeah, I guess I could, and again, that's kind of goes with my philosophy of just doing right by the client. It was what she wanted. I wasn't going to say no just to sort of like, I don't know, out of loyalty to my former employer or whatever. I just thought, yeah, I can't say no. So let's do it. And so that was it. That was my first client. The first, few months, probably maybe even a year, were pretty dicey. But luckily at that time I didn't have a lot of, bills. I had basically a car payment. I was living at home with my parents. And so it was easy for me to do something like this. And so that was my first client. I started to put up business cards around town, just, at the dry cleaners and at the local market and things like that. And I ended up getting clients from that. I have clients to this day who picked up my business card, 10 years ago, randomly at a market and held on to it until they needed me. And so, and it basically grew from there. And like you guys have said, word of mouth. I mean, clients who hire you and take a leap of faith, and you do a good job, and then they tell their friends. So that's basically my story.
That's great, man. The one person that kind of, I don't know, just said, I want to work with you, that probably was a big motivating factor for you starting out. I mean, that's kind of cool that I don't know. I think of a lot of things as like this one point that you can trace everything back to. And that one woman or person that said, I don't want them, I want you, could be credited with a lot of how your life turned out.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I've actually...
Yeah, a real motivating factor in you deciding to take this career path.
Totally. I mean, I've actually expressed that to her on multiple occasions that, I sort of owe it all to her to some extent, and I really mean it. I mean, it wasn't certain at that point that I'd be doing this for a living, and that's kind of just what ended up happening. Thanks largely to just her, her asking me to continue working with her. And even in the first year, it was sort of like, well, I'll do this for a while, so let's see if I can make a go of it. But nothing was really certain, until enough business sort of picked up that it did work out.
And you've taken another leap, and I think this deserves some time on the show, especially under the banner Entrepreneurial Spirit, that you took your business basically from a one-man show like I run here to something much, much bigger than that. And you've got your own store, and you've got employees. If you could just speak generally to that, like what was how did you take that leap? Because that's a huge leap for people.
Oh man, yeah.
Big time.
Yeah, it really was. I mean, and I look back, on some of the just the sort of like strife that I had for years, and I realized like I really have a lot to be thankful for, because for many years I was facing this like kind of limbo condition where I was too busy for one person. I was just like way too busy. I just couldn't keep all the plates spinning. And I realized like, well, this would be more manageable if I had like, a staff, if I had another consultant working for me, and, kind of did the math on that and how that would all work out, billing out my full hourly rate and paying this person X amount and how that would balance out. And also a support staff of like an office manager and bookkeeping and things like that. And, like I said, for years, I kind of like on paper was analyzing things and realizing that the decision that I was facing was either to become sort of more of like what I called a boutique consultancy. Like it would just be still a one-man show. It would just be me. I'd probably have to raise my rate significantly and therefore like lose a lot of clients, but just continue to do like a really, great job for fewer clients, or grow the practice and take a different kind of leap of faith and just sort of, hire a team and that kind of thing. And for a while I tried to do it out of my condo. Like I was working, I was just working out of my home. And I tried to kind of make it work with like a subcontractor and, trying to build a little bit of a team there, but I have a really small condo. I mean, it was really tough to make that work just logistically. And so I realized that what came along with this whole thing was like not only hiring a consultant and hiring an office manager, but moving into an office and other decisions like providing insurance for my employees and things like that. And it just became, the overhead goes from like, well, this is pretty easy. I just need a laptop, like, and it quickly goes to, orders of magnitude more overhead every month to just basically keep the lights on, as they say. It was a pretty big leap, but again, I look back on it and I realize that I basically have everything that I imagined, many years ago. The server rack, the office space, the team of people to support what I do and to grow our services and our offerings. And I'm just really thankful for that.
And you have a great space, man.
Yeah, love the office. It's a great location. And
so in the back of your mind, when you were still that single member LLC, you kind of envision this as a sort of a destination to head, or a goal to head towards.
Yeah. And again, like the server rack, I'm not really joking. I mean, for a lot of years, I thought like this would be my ideal setup, this computer doing my mail service and this type of hardware providing internet connectivity and like a failover and, this kind of system running backups and, this kind of system running home automation and things like that. And sort of shoehorning some of that stuff in again, like into my condo and like a series of shelves and things. And just everything was pretty haphazard. And I thought, if I really wanted to do this really well, it would require a significant investment in capital, but it was kind of fun to actually detail like what my ideal setup would be like technically, and also with regards to like employees and systems and software and things like that.
And without delving too deeply into your personal finances, did you have like a little bit of a cash reserve when you decided you were going to make this leap, or was it pretty much, the money was coming in, the money was going out, but then you just leapt off the cliff?
That's that's a great question. It was, for years of running my own show, it was really hard to kind of manage finances and save for the sort of long-term stuff. It was like just difficult enough to make like quarterly tax payments and things like that. So what I basically did was I sort of capitalized on some luck that I had. You spoke of how you got started right around the Intel transition, and I actually bought Apple stock right before that. Which was right before I think it split, and then of course, then subsequent to that, it split again. So essentially, I didn't have a lot of Apple stock, but I had a very high return on the stock that I did have, and I ended up, again, I basically made a decision at a really lucky time to convert like just a small account that I had from. Actually, going back to the fact that I never finished college, as I mentioned earlier, I had like a very small sort of college fund that was started when I was a kid. It was on the order of like a few $1,000s, nothing crazy. And I basically just converted it all to Apple stock almost around the time when I started in this racket.
True believer.
Yeah, really. I thought, this company seems to be making some really good decisions and seems to be basically poised to sort of take over like entirely new markets. And I thought, I'm all in, and I just went for it. And it turned out to be a great decision. I only regret not buying more at the time. But I held on to it for a very long time. And eventually a few years ago, when I decided to start, to grow the practice, that was the capital investment. And again, it wasn't anything like super significant, but it was something like, a little bit of a backstop to be able to make that leap.
So you did have a little bit of a nest egg.
Yeah.
That's great. And I think this point needs to be made. Again, I keep hearkening back to our state, and we're in this small concentrated area. But I must say that, I think where you're located too is sort of like the right place to start the type of business that you were looking for. I mean, if you just head up the road a piece, drive about an hour to where I'm located, it's a little bit more rural. We're not as densely populated, and you're a little bit closer to New York City. The population is just generally a lot. Financially speaking, it's a more lucrative place to live in Southern Connecticut. So I think you've got a lot of not that you aren't doing a lot of things right, but I think you've got. Your location, I think, really works for you and speaks to your business. Oh,
completely. Yeah. And I realized that this business would be really difficult to bring elsewhere in the same sort of format anyway. The scale would just be different. I mean, it works for a lot of people in a lot of places, having a consultancy and, multiple different consultants and things like that. But it happened to work out well just here. I mean, that's another piece of luck, I guess. I grew up in this area. My parents were not, wealthy by any stretch, but I'm, just sort of lucky enough to have grown up here. And we were, I guess I'm fourth generation in this area, and we've seen a lot of people in the last, single generation move into this area with a lot of wealth coming from, Wall Street and things like that. And so, yeah, that certainly helps quite a bit with, just basically sustaining a market for this line of work at this level of, I don't know what you call it, but basically level of, the sort of rates that we charge.
Sure. And it's certainly, I would imagine, factored into your decision making. You have a real good gut feeling for whether a business like you have is going to work in where you're located. If you're in the middle of a cornfield in Iowa, it's a little bit more of a struggle.
Yeah.
And it's interesting too, because again, working in the same state, it's nothing for me to drive 90 minutes to meet with a client. And, I would think that both you and Sam don't necessarily have to go that far to reel in the fish.
Yeah, I mean, it's densely populated and very affluent in a lot of the areas. So certainly that, as Joe mentioned, it is a factor for sure. And the relative closeness to New York City, that's a big one.
Yeah, exactly. Being a suburb of New York City, there's a certain sort of special sauce in this area where the expenses are higher for sure, but disposable income is also significantly higher. So you have home users that are able to spend the kind of money that businesses are able to spend elsewhere. People that are willing to spend a significant amount of money just to get a very high level of service, basically. But it also means, you need to kind of like provide that level of service. And there's a lot of stuff you have to do above and beyond the just, this sort of hourly rate that you spend on site, just to please the clients. And I'm not saying other people don't do that elsewhere, but there's a certain sort of like high level of expectation here as well.
To put this in perspective for people listening in other parts of the country, in Joe and Sam's area of Connecticut, there are actual services that are hired to just come on the client's property and clean up the dog excrement, right? And these guys do really well, right?
That's my side business.
Yeah, that was my joke. I was too slow on it.
Too slow on the draw. Yeah, no, and the other example I always give is like people who are covered by AppleCare would rather have us come on site, pick up a computer, lug it to the Apple store, wait in line, hand it off to the Genius Bar, go back, pick it up, bring it back home, and pay us for all this time to basically get free service from Apple. So it's costing them, X number of hours of time just to make their life a little bit easier. And, they're willing to pay for that. And we're willing to provide that service.
Yeah, that's a nice sort of understood expectation that they have, where they're extremely willing to pay for services in the same way that most businesses are used to paying for IT services. They understand that comes at a price. And I think that your clients also understand that, your residential clients. And that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I had a client recently say to me something like, did I mention this on the show or just to you guys personally?
Kay Ginger is moving to Connecticut.
Yeah, exactly. Watch out, Sam.
But no more room here, bud. No,
yeah, not in Southern Fairfield County. But a client said to me, and I don't know if this was on the show or if I said this to one of you guys personally, but something like, don't try to save me money. Don't waste my money, but don't try to help me save money. If there's a solution that's more expensive, that's going to provide 5% better performance or something like that, that's the solution I want. In other words, clients are really willing to pay for just top-notch, performance, top-notch service, that kind of thing.
Did you hug that person after they said that?
Exactly.
I would have.
Yeah, because I felt the exact opposite today.
Yeah, well,
give you a hug.
Unfortunately, this was kind of in retrospect with a situation we were dealing with where, basically we could have spent some more of the client's money up front to make things a little bit more reliable. And I won't get into details, but it really made me realize that sometimes, my motivation, what I think might be expensive or something that, I wouldn't want to pay more for, a client would be perfectly willing to. And so you kind of have to keep that in mind with this type of client as well, where, again, not to waste their money, but just to keep all options on the table until you have that conversation with the client.
Yeah, sure.
Of customers of all kinds. Am I on the cloud?